Welcome to Veil, your window to the world. Get ready to peel back the layers of global news in a fresh and engaging way. Here at Veil, we shine a light on the stories that shape our planet, from breaking headlines to inspiring human interest pieces. Join us as we navigate the complexities of current events, providing clarity and context to what really matters. Stay informed, stay curious, and let's explore the world together. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like for your daily dose of headlines that matter. In early January 2026, the international community was jolted by a dramatic escalation of geopolitical tensions, a large-scale U.S. military operation in Venezuela that resulted in the capture of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores. Amidst a flurry of global reactions, China emerged as one of the most vocal and adamant critics of the operation. This article explores the multifaceted dimensions of China's response, the strategic partnership between Beijing and Caracas, the legal arguments presented by the Chinese Foreign Ministry, and the broader implications for international law and global stability. The incident, a geopolitical earthquake. On Saturday, January 3, 2026, the world woke to news of a significant military intervention. Reports indicated that U.S. forces, specifically elite units like Delta Force, had conducted coordinated airstrikes across Venezuela, targeting key military and civilian infrastructure. The primary objective, as later confirmed by U.S. President Donald Trump via a Truth Social post, was the apprehension of Nicolas Maduro. Maduro and his wife were reportedly seized and flown out of the country to New York City, where they faced long-standing indictments related to drug trafficking and narco-terrorism. In Caracas, the strikes caused widespread disruption, including power outages and a national emergency declared by the remaining administration. 2. China's official response, deeply shocked and strongly condemning. China's reaction was swift and unambiguous. Within hours of the announcement, the Chinese Foreign Ministry issued a series of statements that escalated in urgency. The initial condemnation. On Saturday evening, a spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MOFA, stated that China was deeply shocked by the blatant use of force against a sovereign state. The language used was intentionally severe, labeling the U.S. action as a hegemonic act that not only violated Venezuela's sovereignty but also threatened the peace and security of the entire Latin American and Caribbean region. The demand for release. By Sunday, January 4, 2026, the rhetoric sharpened. China officially demanded the immediate release of Maduro and his wife. The Foreign Ministry emphasized the need for Washington to ensure their personal safety and called for an end to what it termed an attempt at toppling the government of Venezuela. Beijing's stance was clear. The internal affairs of Venezuela should be settled by its own people through dialogue and negotiation, not through external military force. 3. The legal argument, a breach of international law. Central to China's critique was the assertion that the U.S. operation constituted a flagrant breach of international law, a violation of the UN Charter. China argued that the airstrikes and the subsequent seizure of a sitting head of state violated the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. The Charter prohibits the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. By bypassing the UN Security Council and acting unilaterally, Beijing contended that the U.S. was undermining the very foundation of the modern international order. Sovereign immunity and diplomatic norms. The capture of Maduro also raised profound questions about head of state immunity. China's statement suggested that the forcible removal of a leader from his home country is a violation of basic norms in international relations. Even if the U.S. considered Maduro's presidency illegitimate following disputed elections, Beijing maintained that international law does not grant a single nation the right to serve as judge, jury, and executioner regarding the leadership of another sovereign state. The danger of precedent. Chinese military and diplomatic experts warned that such hegemonic behavior sets a dangerous precedent. If one superpower can unilaterally remove a leader it deems unfavorable, it signals a return to jungle law where the strong dominate the weak. This perspective aligns with China's long-standing foreign policy of non-interference, which it promotes as a countermodel to Western interventionism. 4. The strategic stakes. China's interests in Venezuela. China's firm defense of Maduro is not merely a matter of legal principle. It is rooted in deep-seated strategic and economic interests. A decades-long partnership. The relationship between Beijing and Caracas was solidified during the tenure of Hugo Chavez and continued under Maduro. Over the past 2 decades, China provided Venezuela with tens of billions of dollars in loans, often backed by oil. This partnership was built on a shared vision of a multipolar world, one where U.S. influence is balanced by other global powers. B. Energy security. Venezuela possesses the world's largest proven oil reserves. Despite US sanctions, China remained a major buyer of Venezuelan crude. The fall of the Maduro government and the potential installation of a US-backed administration, such as the one led by opposition figure Maria Corina Machado, poses a significant risk to China's energy investments and its future access to South American resources. C. The political loss. The capture of Maduro is seen as a major setback for China's influence in Latin America. Venezuela served as a strategic anchor for Beijing in the Western Hemisphere, a region traditionally considered the backyard of the United States. Losing a close ally to a direct military intervention is a blow to China's narrative of a declining West and a rising East. V. Global reactions and comparisons. China was not alone in its condemnation, but the world was sharply divided. Russia and Iran, both countries, also under heavy US sanctions, joined China in calling for Maduro's release. The Kremlin described the move as an unacceptable violation of sovereignty. The European Union and UK, while some European leaders, like UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, expressed no tears for the end of the Maduro regime, others, including France and the EU leadership, urged restraint and emphasized the importance of following the rule of law and international protocols. Latin American neighbors. The reaction within the region was mixed. Brazil's President Lula da Silva condemned the flagrant violation of international law, while others like Argentina's Javier Milei supported the US action as a necessary step against a dictatorship. 6. Military analysis. The new style of intervention. Chinese military experts, writing in state-aligned outlets like the Global Times, analyzed the tactical execution of the US operation. They noted the use of electronic warfare to jam Venezuelan defenses and the precision of the Delta Force raid. However, their analysis was tempered by a warning. Military success does not equate to political legitimacy. They argued that the US might find itself mired in a long-haul occupation if it attempts to run Venezuela, as President Trump suggested. 7. Broader geopolitical implications. The Venezuela crisis of 2026 acts as a litmus test for the current state of global power dynamics. A. The re-emergence of the Monroe Doctrine. The US action is being interpreted as a modern-day application of the Monroe Doctrine, the 19th century policy of opposing European, or in this case, Chinese and Russian, interference in the Americas. By removing Maduro, the US is signaling its intent to reassert dominance in its own hemisphere. B. Challenges to multilateralism. For China, the US operation is the ultimate proof that the rules-based international order touted by Washington is actually a tool for US hegemony. Beijing is likely to use this event to rally support among the global South, arguing that no nation is truly sovereign if its leaders can be snatched from their palaces by US special forces. C. Impact on other conflicts. Analysts are also looking at how this event influences other flashpoints, such as Taiwan. While US scholars suggest that China is unlikely to change its Taiwan strategy in response to Venezuela, the precedent of a unilateral US regime change operation will undoubtedly factor into Beijing's long-term defense calculations. 8. Conclusion. A world at a crossroads. The capture of Nicolas Maduro and China's forceful demand for his release represent more than just a diplomatic spat. They signify a fundamental clash over the future of international relations. On one side is a United States willing to use its unparalleled military power to enforce its legal and political will. On the other is a China that champions a rigid interpretation of sovereignty and non-interference, largely to protect its own global interests and those of its partners. As the situation in Venezuela unfolds, with the potential for civil unrest, a transition to a new government, or a protracted legal battle in New York, the grave concern expressed by China highlights a world that is becoming increasingly polarized. The outcome of this crisis will likely determine whether the 21st century is defined by international law and multilateralism or by a return to the great power competitions of the past. For now, Beijing remains firm. The capture of Maduro is a breach of international law that cannot go unchallenged. Whether this leads to more than just rhetorical condemnation, perhaps in the form of economic sanctions or increased military posturing, remains the critical question for the coming months.